Hey, if you're here, it means something already slipped past you today. That's all right. This story isn't about fixing everything, it's about choosing. The first time it happened, Mara thought she was dissociating. She was standing in the kitchen of her childhood home, barefoot on cool tile, watching her mother reach for a mug that had been cracked along the handle for as long as Mara could remember. Sunlight slanted in through the window above the sink, catching dust in the air, turning it briefly golden. The mug slipped. It shattered on the floor, ceramic exploding outward in a sharp, sudden sound. Mara flinched, and the sound folded inward. The shards lifted. The crack rewound itself. The mug was whole again, warm in her mother's hand, steam still rising. 5 minutes earlier, Mara stood in the same place, heart racing, breath shallow, the sunlight unchanged. Her mother frowned at the mug. "Did you hear something?" she asked. Mara didn't answer. She was too busy realizing that the clock on the microwave had moved backward. Mara didn't tell anyone. That was her first instinct. Not secrecy exactly. Self-preservation. She waited for the feeling to fade, for the world to snap back into its proper order, for her heart to slow down and convince her it had imagined the whole thing. It didn't. She tested it carefully. Accidentally at first. A burnt piece of toast. A spilled glass of water. A text she regretted sending too quickly. Each time, the same thing happened. A tightening in her chest. A pressure behind her eyes. And then, rewind. Always 5 minutes. Never more. Never less. She learned quickly what it couldn't do. It couldn't change moods already settled. It couldn't undo words that had already landed in someone's body. It couldn't fix grief. And then she learned the rule. The one she didn't want. The rewind only worked once per person. She discovered that on a Tuesday afternoon, standing in the hallway outside her best friend Jonah's locker, she rewound the moment where she laughed instead of listening. The next time she tried, with Jonah, it didn't work. Mara made a list, not written down, not officially. Just a quiet tally she carried with her, like loose change in a pocket. She was afraid to check. Her mother, her father, Jonah. People she loved. People the rewind would work for. Everyone else fell into a different category. Classmates, teachers, strangers, people who mattered, but not in the way the rule required. That scared her more than the power itself. Because love, she realized, was not evenly distributed, and time knew the difference. She stopped using the rewind unless it felt necessary. Really necessary. She learned to sit inside mistakes instead of immediately reaching for the reset. Learned to let moments bruise her instead of smoothing them out. But sometimes, the 5 minutes called to her anyway, especially when someone she loved was about to get hurt. The first time she used it on purpose, she cried afterward. Her father had been rushing out the door late for work, keys already in hand. He kissed her forehead absent-mindedly, distracted, already elsewhere. "Mara," he said, half-turned. "I'll be late tonight?" She felt it then, that familiar tightening, the sense that this moment mattered more than it should. "Wait," she said. He paused. "I love you," she added, suddenly unsure why she needed to say it out loud. He smiled, surprised. "Love you too, kid." The front door closed behind him. 5 minutes later, her phone rang. She didn't wait for the full sentence. She rewound. This time, When he kissed her forehead, she hugged him tighter. "I love you," she said again. "I know," he replied, warm and steady. That night, when the hospital called, Mara sat on the edge of her bed and understood exactly what she had spent. Mara noticed the 5 minutes most when she chose not to use them. They hovered at the edge of moments, subtle but insistent, like a hand resting just behind her shoulder. She could feel when something was about to go wrong now. A sentence spoken too quickly, a look that landed harder than intended, the way voices sharpened when people were tired and didn't know it yet. At school, she sat through classes half aware of the clock, half aware of the people around her. Time had texture now. It stretched and tightened in places she had never noticed before. Jonah caught her staring at him during lunch. "What?" he asked, mouth half full, smiling. "Nothing," she said too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. That was definitely something. Mara considered telling him again, explaining the rule more clearly. The once per person limit. The way it felt when the rewind refused you. She didn't. Instead, she watched as he laughed at something across the table, the sound easy and unguarded. The 5 minutes stirred faintly, unused. She let them be. That evening, her mother burnt dinner. It wasn't dramatic, just the smell first, faint and acrid, drifting down the hallway. Mara stepped into the kitchen to find her mother standing at the stove. Wooden spoon paused mid-air, eyes unfocused. "Oh," her mother said, blinking. "I forgot about it." The pot was ruined. The food beyond saving. Mara felt the pressure rise immediately. 5 minutes. She could rewind. She could stop the moment before it happened, before her mother drifted somewhere else entirely. Her mother sighed and reached for the sink. "It's fine," she said. "We'll order something." Mara watched her carefully. The slump in her shoulders, the way grief still sat inside her, quiet but heavy. Mara didn't rewind. They ate takeout on the couch instead, knees touching, television murmuring something neither of them followed. Her mother laughed once at a joke she didn't quite hear. The sound surprised them both. Mara felt the 5 minutes loosen their hold. The next test came without warning. Jonah called late, voice tight. "My parents are fighting again," he said. "I don't know why I called. I just needed to hear something normal." Mara sat on the edge of her bed, phone warm against her ear. "You can stay," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." They talked about nothing, about a movie they both half-watched years ago, about a teacher who mispronounced everyone's name. Jonah's voice steadied as the minutes passed. Then he said it. "I think I might leave after graduation." Mara felt the pressure surge, stronger than it ever had before. 5 minutes. She could rewind. She could keep the moment where he hadn't said it yet, where things were still simple. Her chest tightened. "Leave where?" she asked. "Anywhere," Jonah said. "I don't want to get stuck." Mara closed her eyes. She didn't rewind. They stayed on the line until neither of them had anything left to say. When the call ended, the 5 minutes receded slowly, reluctantly, like a tide pulling back. Mara lay awake long after, realizing something new and frightening. The power wasn't teaching her how to change time. It was teaching her how to sit with it. The first time, the rewind failed without explanation. Mara panicked. It happened in the grocery store, of all places. Her mother reached for a carton of eggs, lost her grip, and sent them crashing to the floor. The sound echoed sharply through the aisle. People turned. Someone laughed awkwardly. Mara felt the pressure rise instantly. She rewound. Nothing happened. The mess stayed. Her mother flushed, embarrassed, already apologizing to a store employee who hurried over. Mara stood frozen, heart racing. Later, in the car, she tried again. Burnt toast, spilled water, small things. The rewind worked. Only then did she understand. It wasn't about accidents. It was about people. And it was selective. Mara started mapping the rule the way a person mapped a bruise. Gently, unwilling to press too hard. It wasn't about physical distance. The rewind worked whether someone was beside her or miles away. It wasn't about how long she'd known them. It wasn't even about how much she liked them. It was about love, the real kind. The kind that rearranged your day without asking. The kind that made your stomach drop when a phone rang at the wrong hour. The kind that made you careful with your words, because you knew they would live in someone else after you said them. Mara hated that time could measure it. She tested the boundary in small ways, hoping to be wrong. A teacher she admired dropped a stack of papers. Mara felt the pressure rise, quick and automatic. She tried to pull the 5 minutes back. Nothing. A classmate she'd never liked but felt sorry for slipped on ice outside the school entrance. Mara winced, tried again. Nothing. Then Jonah bumped his shoulder against a locker corner and cursed under his breath, rubbing at the sting. Mara didn't even decide. The pressure rose like a reflex. She stopped herself. She stood there, heart pounding, and watched him shake it off. He looked up at her, puzzled. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," she said, voice thin. It wasn't nothing. It was the realization that even the temptation was a kind of spending. Not time, exactly, but her own calm. That afternoon, she sat at her desk and opened a blank page in her notebook, pen hovering. She didn't write the rule down. That made it too real. Instead, she wrote names. Just names. Like a prayer she didn't believe in. Mom, Dad, Jonah. She stared at the list until her eyes burned, then closed the notebook and shoved it under a stack of homework, as if hiding it could change anything. The next time she used the rewind, she didn't mean to. It happened at dinner. Her mother had been quiet all evening, the kind of quiet that didn't invite questions. Mara had learned to respect it, even when it made her feel like the house was holding its breath. "You didn't do the dishes," her mother said suddenly. Mara blinked. "I did them yesterday." "I mean today," her mother said, sharper than necessary. Mara felt heat rise in her face. Not anger, something worse. The unfairness of being scolded for a routine when everything else had fallen apart. "I'm not your maid," Mara snapped. The words hit the room like a thrown object. Her mother's expression changed instantly, not to anger, but to hurt so quick it looked like surprise. Mara felt the pressure surge hard behind her eyes. 5 minutes. She didn't choose it so much as reach for it on instinct, desperate to pull the words back before they could settle. The kitchen blurred. The lights seemed to tilt. Then she was sitting again. 5 minutes earlier, her fork paused over her plate. The television in the other room said the same line again. Her mother's hand rested in the same place on the edge of the table. "You didn't do the dishes," her mother said, exactly as before. Mara's heart hammered. She swallowed. "I can do them," Mara said carefully. After dinner, her mother's shoulders eased by a fraction. "Thank you," she said. Mara kept her face neutral until the moment passed. Later, alone in her room, she cried into her pillow with the strangest kind of guilt. She hadn't rewound an accident. She'd rewound herself. She sat up, wiping her face with the heel of her hand, and realized what that meant. The 5 minutes weren't just for saving other people from pain. They were for saving the version of her that she still wanted to be. 2 weeks later, her mother made pancakes on a Saturday morning for no clear reason. The batter was too thin. The first one tore when she flipped it. The second one burned at the edges. But the kitchen smelled like butter, and something almost like normal. Mara watched from the doorway, arms folded loosely across her chest. Her mother didn't look up. "Don't just stand there," she said. "Get a plate." Mara did. She set it on the counter, then leaned there, feeling the warmth from the stove seep into her skin. Her mother slid a lopsided pancake onto the plate and gave a small, tired smile. Mara felt the pressure rise sharply. Not because something was going wrong, because something was right. She saw it, suddenly, how fragile this moment was. How easy it would be for a sentence to shatter it. How quickly laughter could turn into silence. The 5 minutes hovered, eager. Mara did nothing. She ate the pancake anyway, even though it was burnt. She smiled when her mother laughed at the shape of the next one. She let the moment exist without touching it. When her mother's smile faded later, when she drifted into quiet again, Mara didn't chase the earlier version of her back. She let grief move through the house like weather. That was new. That was hard. That was necessary. The first time Mara told Jonah the whole truth, they were sitting on the hood of his car in the school parking lot after dark. It was one of those nights where the air felt thin and electric, the kind where everything said sounded too honest. Jonah held 2 sodas, passing one to her without looking. He'd gotten used to her silences. He never filled them unless she asked. Mara stared out at the empty lot. "I can only do it once," she said. Jonah didn't move. "Once per person?" Mara nodded. "And you already used mine." "Yes." Jonah's jaw flexed slightly, not angry, just absorbing. "So your mom still has one," he said carefully. "And your dad did too." Mara stared at her hands. "I used it on him." Jonah didn't ask why. Not yet. Mara swallowed. "I didn't even know it was the last time I'd get with him." The words came out small, too small for what they carried. Jonah's expression softened. He shifted closer, shoulder brushing hers. "You couldn't have known," he said. Mara laughed once, bitter and quiet, but time did. Jonah looked at her then, really looked. "What does it feel like?" he asked. "When it happens." Mara closed her eyes, trying to find words that didn't make it sound like a trick. "It feels like realizing you're about to fall," she said, "and then not hitting the ground." Jonah nodded slowly. "And when you can't?" Mara opened her eyes. "It feels like being wide awake when you want to disappear." Jonah stared out at the lot again, thinking. "So what do you do now?" he asked. Mara's throat tightened. "I stop wasting the 5 minutes on moments that only hurt my pride," she said. "And I start figuring out what I'm actually willing to spend them on." Jonah was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Promise me something." "What?" Mara asked. "If you ever feel like you're about to use it on me again," Jonah said, voice steady, "tell me. Even if it's stupid, even if it's small, just tell me you wanted to." Mara blinked. Why would I do that? Jonah shrugged, but his eyes were serious. Because I want to know what you're carrying, he said. And because if I'm one of the people that costs you, I want to be worth it. Mara's chest tightened, the pressure rising faintly just from hearing him say it. She didn't rewind. She leaned her head against his shoulder and let the moment hold them. Mara began to notice how love changed shape. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It shifted in small increments, like seasons. One day, Jonah was just Jonah. The next day, he was the person she texted first when something good happened. The next day, he was the person whose silence made her stomach hurt. Her mother changed too. Some mornings, she moved through the house with a fragile steadiness. Some mornings, she couldn't get out of bed. Mara's love didn't lessen. It deepened into something heavier, something that required more of her. And the 5 minutes sat inside that love like a coin pressed into her palm. She started to understand the cruelest part of the rule. You couldn't save everyone you loved, not because the power was limited, because love kept expanding, and time refused to expand with it. That realization settled into her slowly, not as panic, but as resolve. If she was going to spend the 5 minutes again, it would not be to fix a tone or erase embarrassment. It would be because something irreversible was about to happen. And she could feel the world gathering those moments, one by one. The first truly irreversible moment arrived on an ordinary afternoon. Mara's mother was in the laundry room, folding towels with mechanical focus. The radio on the shelf played an old song her father used to hum under his breath, the kind that made Mara's throat tighten without warning. Her mother paused mid-fold. "Mara," she said. Mara looked up. Her mother's eyes were wet, but her voice was calm. "I keep thinking I hear him," her mother said. "In the hallway, in the driveway, like he's about to come in and ask what's for dinner." Mara felt the pressure rise, sudden and sharp, as if time itself had flinched. 5 minutes. She didn't know what it would fix. She didn't know what she would say differently, but she wanted, for one reckless second, to rewind the entire last year, to unwind the phone call, to unmake the crash, to return her father to the house like a misplaced object. But the 5 minutes only offered what it always offered, a small mercy. Mara stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother. "I miss him too," she said. Her mother's breath shook as she exhaled. "I'm scared I'm forgetting his voice," her mother whispered. Mara held her tighter. "You're not," Mara said. "You're just learning how to live without hearing it every day." Her mother's body trembled against her. Mara felt the 5 minutes hovering, insistent. She didn't spend them. She stayed. And that was the first time Mara understood fully that the rewind could never be the center of her life. It was only ever going to be the edge. That night, Mara lay awake and listened to the house settle. She imagined the 5 minutes as a small room she carried inside her. A room with only a few doors. A room she could enter once for each person she truly loved. And only once. She thought about how easy it would be to waste it on fear. Then she thought about Jonah's voice, asking her to tell him if she ever wanted to use it again. She picked up her phone and opened his contact. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Instead of texting, she set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Not because she didn't want him, because she didn't want to spend love like a currency that had to be accounted for every night. She wanted, desperately, to learn how to live in a world that wouldn't rewind for her. Somewhere near morning, She finally fell asleep, and the 5 minutes slept with her, quiet for the first time in weeks. The first time Mara broke her own rule about saving the 5 minutes for something irreversible, it was because of a door. Jonah was walking her home after a late study session. The streetlights were sparse, pools of yellow light separated by long stretches of shadow. They talked about a quiz, about a teacher who hated everyone equally, about nothing that mattered. At Mara's front gate, Jonah paused. "I'm thinking about leaving," he said again, softer this time. Not as a confession, as a truth he was trying to practice saying. Mara's chest tightened. The pressure rose instantly, not because she wanted to change the words, but because she wanted to change the world that would make him want to go. She didn't move. Jonah reached out, thumb brushing her knuckles. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. Mara swallowed hard. "Then don't." Jonah's mouth twitched with something like pain. "I can't promise that," he said. "Not if I'm honest." Mara felt the 5 minutes surge so hard she went dizzy. She could rewind. She could step back into the version of the conversation before he said it. Before she begged. She could save face. She could save the illusion. Mara used the rewind. The street bent. The light shifted. Jonah's hand returned to his side. The moment rewound into place like a thread pulled through fabric. Jonah was saying, "I'm thinking about leaving again." This time, Mara inhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. Jonah blinked, startled. Mara's voice trembled, but she held it. "Tell me what you mean," she said. "Not the version that protects me, the real one." Jonah's shoulders loosened by a fraction, relief mingling with fear. "Can you come sit on the steps with me?" he asked. Mara nodded. She led him to the front steps. They sat close, knees almost touching, the door behind them shut but present. Mara felt the 5 minutes settle, spent, not on erasing pain, on making room for it without tearing something apart. Jonah didn't leave right away. That surprised Mara more than the conversation itself. After that night on the steps, things didn't resolve into clarity or collapse into distance. They stayed suspended, honest, uncomfortable, unfinished. Jonah still walked her home some nights, still texted her photos of things he thought she'd notice. A crack in the sidewalk shaped like a lightning bolt. A dog sitting patiently outside a bakery, leash trailing, waiting for someone who hadn't come back yet. Mara noticed herself watching him differently now, not with fear exactly, but with awareness. Every laugh, every pause, every look carried weight. The 5 minutes were no longer abstract. They pressed against her ribs when Jonah hesitated before speaking, when his smile arrived a beat too late. She never used them. That restraint felt heavier than the power ever had. Mara's mother started going out again. At first it was small, a grocery run that took longer than necessary, a walk around the block just after sunset. Then, one evening, she stood in the doorway with her keys in hand and said, "I'm meeting someone for coffee." Mara looked up from the couch, heart stuttering. "Oh," she said. "Okay." Her mother smiled, tentative and hopeful all at once. "I'll be back later." Mara nodded, forcing her expression into something supportive. She waited until the door closed before she let the breath leave her lungs. The 5 minutes stirred faintly, not because anything had gone wrong, because something had changed. Mara walked into the kitchen and stood there, listening to the quiet house. She imagined rewinding. Imagined stopping her mother before the door opened. Imagined keeping her exactly as she was, grief intact and familiar. The thought made her stomach turn. She sat at the table and waited instead. When her mother came home hours later, she looked lighter. Not happy, just less folded in on herself. Mara hugged her and didn't spend the time. The first time Mara realized the rewind could be felt by others, she was sitting in class. Jonah was beside her, tapping his pen against the desk, leg bouncing with restless energy. The teacher droned on at the front of the room, something about historical cycles that felt cruelly ironic. Jonah leaned close. "Do you ever feel like something almost happened?" Mara's pen slipped in her fingers. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. "Like you were about to say something," he said. "Or I was. And then it didn't." Mara felt cold spread through her chest. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe." Jonah frowned slightly, thoughtful. "It happens around you a lot." Mara didn't answer. She spent the rest of the day hyper-aware of herself, of every moment where the 5 minutes brushed up against reality, of every pause that might leave an echo. The power, she realized, was not invisible. It was subtle, but it was loud enough to leave fingerprints. That night, Mara dreamed of clocks. Not ticking ones, not digital ones, just hands floating in darkness, all pointing in slightly different directions. Every time she reached for one, it dissolved. She woke before dawn, heart racing, the pressure behind her eyes lingering even in sleep. She sat up in bed and waited for it to pass. It did, but slower than before. Jonah told her about the acceptance letter a week later. They were sitting in his car, engine off, windows fogged from their breath. He held the envelope like it might disappear if he looked away. "I got in," he said. Mara smiled. "A real one." It hurt, but it was real. "That's amazing," she said. Jonah nodded, swallowing. "It's far." "I know." Silence stretched between them, thick and tender. Jonah glanced at her. "You're not rewinding this, are you?" Mara met his eyes. "No." He smiled, sad and relieved at the same time. "Good." They sat there until the windows cleared and the world resumed its shape. The 5 minutes stayed quiet. Mara learned something unexpected as summer approached. The rewind didn't weaken. She did. Not physically, emotionally. Every choice carried more weight now. Every moment felt edged with consequence. She found herself exhausted by ordinary days, not because they were hard, but because she was paying attention to all of them. One afternoon, she snapped at Jonah over something stupid. He snapped back. The words landed hard, sharper than either of them intended. Mara felt the pressure surge violently. 5 minutes. She closed her eyes and didn't use them. They sat in the silence afterward, breathing unevenly. "I'm sorry," Jonah said finally. "So am I," Mara replied. The apology felt heavier than any rewind ever had. Mara's mother cried in the bathroom one night. Mara heard it through the thin wall, quiet and unguarded. She stood in the hallway, heart pounding, the 5 minutes pressing hard against her chest. She could rewind. She could go back to before the tears started, before the memory that triggered them surfaced. Instead, she knocked. Her mother opened the door, startled, then pulled her into an embrace. They stood there together, grief and love tangled and unresolved. Mara felt the 5 minutes loosen, unused. Jonah left on a Thursday. Mara stood with him on the platform, hands tucked into the sleeves of her jacket, watching the train idle like it wasn't sure it wanted to go either. The air smelled like metal and rain. Everything felt too sharp, too clean. Jonah shifted his bag higher on his shoulder. "I'll call," he said. "I know," Mara replied. They had already said the important things. Said them slowly, carefully, without the rewind hovering between them this time. Jonah stepped closer, resting his forehead briefly against hers. "You're going to be okay," he said. Mara nodded. She believed him. That was the strange part. When the train doors opened, Jonah hesitated, eyes searching her face one last time, as if looking for a sign she might change her mind, or change time. Mara smiled, steady and sad. He boarded. The doors closed. The train pulled away. Mara felt the pressure rise automatically. Her body still remembered the old reflex. 5 minutes. She let the train disappear instead. The first week without Jonah felt unreal. Not empty. Not painful in the way she'd expected. Just misaligned. Like furniture moved slightly out of place. She reached for her phone and stopped herself. Heard something funny and realized there was no one to tell yet. The 5 minutes stirred more often now. They rose during quiet moments, during the ache of missing, during the small panic of imagining Jonah somewhere new without her. Mara didn't spend them. She wrote instead. Not about the power, about moments, about conversations she didn't want to forget, about the sound of Jonah's laugh when he tried not to laugh, about the way her mother hummed while folding laundry now, softer than before, but there. Time, she learned, could be held without being altered. The second time, Mara used the rewind on purpose. It wasn't for love. It was for fear. She was driving alone on a familiar road when a car ran a red light and missed her by inches. The horn blared. Her heart slammed into her ribs. She pulled over, shaking, breath coming too fast. The pressure rose violently. She rewound. 5 minutes earlier, she was still waiting at the light. This time, she waited longer before going. The car sped past, oblivious. Mara pulled over again, heart racing all the same. She sat there for a long time afterward, hands clenched on the wheel, realizing what she had done. The rewind had worked, because fear, she realized, loved people too. It loved her. That frightened her more than the near miss had. Mara began to notice the temptation to rewind, growing in places she hadn't expected. An argument with a coworker. A comment she regretted during a meeting. A joke that landed wrong. Each moment felt like it could be smoothed, polished, made harmless. She resisted. But resistance had a cost. At night, she dreamed of the small room inside her again. The one with doors. More doors now than before. Some marked with names, some not. She woke exhausted. Her mother fell one afternoon. It happened fast. A slip on the back steps. A sharp intake of breath. Her mother crumpled, clutching her ankle, face pale with pain. Mara felt the pressure explode instantly. 5 minutes. She was already moving when the rewind pulled her back. The moment replayed. The misstep. The fall. This time, Mara shouted a warning. Her mother grabbed the railing, stumbled, but stayed upright. They stared at each other, shaken. Later, at urgent care, her mother frowned at the doctor's explanation. "It should have broken," the doctor said. "I don't know how it didn't." Mara sat silently, nausea curling in her stomach. She had spent the 5 minutes, and she knew she wouldn't get them back. That night, Mara cried harder than she had in years. Not because her mother was hurt, because her mother was safe. She had used the rewind not for goodbye, not for closure, not for love spoken in time, but for prevention, for control. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing how thin the line was between mercy and refusal to accept risk. The 5 minutes were quiet now, spent. She felt their absence like a missing tooth. Weeks passed. Her mother healed. Life continued. Mara waited for the rewind to return. It didn't. She tested it cautiously. Burnt toast, spilled coffee, a dropped phone. Nothing. The pressure never came. Mara sat at her desk one evening, the truth settling in with surprising calm. She had spent the last of it. Mara called Jonah. He answered from a noisy street. Laughter and traffic bleeding into the line. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" "Yes," Mara replied. And she meant it. She told him about the fall, about the rewind, about how it was gone now. Jonah listened, without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Are you scared?" he asked. Mara thought about it. "No," she said. "I think I'm relieved." Jonah exhaled softly. "Yeah, that makes sense." They talked until the street noise faded, and Jonah had to go. When the call ended, Mara didn't feel the pressure rise. Time moved forward. The world didn't collapse without the rewind. Moments still hurt. People still left. Accidents still happened. But Mara noticed something else. She was more present, more careful with her words, more willing to say the hard thing now, instead of saving it for a version of the future that might never come. Time no longer felt like something she had to manage. It felt like something she was finally allowed to live inside. Years later, Mara stood in a small kitchen that wasn't her childhood home, listening to water boil. She had built a life that didn't rely on correction, friends, work she cared about, love that arrived slowly and stayed. Sometimes, she still felt the ghost of the 5 minutes. A pause before speaking, a breath held too long. She smiled at it when it happened. Her mother laughed one evening, the sound warm and unguarded. Mara closed her eyes. Time didn't rewind. It didn't need to. The last time Mara thought about the power, she was sitting alone, watching dusk settle into night. She realized she couldn't remember the exact feeling of the rewind anymore. Only what it had taught her, that love wasn't about preserving every version of a person. It was about choosing how to meet them where they were. 5 minutes had never been much, but it had been enough to teach Mara how to let moments stand, even when they hurt, especially when they hurt. Time kept moving. And this time, she moved with it. Thank you for staying with this one. Some stories ask what you would change if you could. This one asks what you choose to keep. If you felt the pull of those 5 minutes at any point, that's human. If you felt relief when they were gone, that's human too. Time doesn't give refunds, but it does give meaning. This has been 5 minutes back. I'll meet you again, right where the moment holds.